Welcome and thank you for joining today's conference, Niche Stakeholders Working Group Update. Please note that all participant lines will be muted until the Q&A portion of the call. We'll provide you with instructions on how to ask a verbal question at that time. You are welcome to submit written questions during the presentation, and these will be addressed during Q&A. To submit a written question, use the chat panel on the right-hand side of your screen. Choose All Panelists from the Send To drop-down menu. With that, I'll turn the call over to Liz Clark. Please go ahead.
Good morning, everyone. I'm Liz Clark with the Professional Development Services branch staff, and I'd also like to thank you for joining us today for this webinar. We have two speakers today. Dr. Karen Rozensher is a field veterinary medical officer in South Georgia and has been with Veterinary Services for 2.5 years. She is passionate about her work as a veterinarian in the realm of regulatory medicine and is a strong advocate of the One Health initiative. We also have Dr. Sierra Burrell, who is a veterinary medical officer in Annapolis, Maryland. She began her career with USDA as an HPAI term VMO in Columbia, South Carolina. And Dr. Burrell has been with Veterinary Services for a little over 2.5 years. And with that, I'm going to pass it over to Karen.
Thank you so much, Rita and Liz. Good morning, everyone, and welcome to our presentation today of the SPURS Special Project, specifically the Niche Stakeholder Working Group. You'll see it listed in the future slides here as NSWG, so that is what it stands for. And I'd like to clear the air at this moment and let you know that we may say niche, we may say niche. It's sort of a tomato-tomato depending on which dictionary you look at. So if we say one or the other, just know that we're talking about the same topic. So with that, a little bit of background as to what in the world a SPURS Special Project actually is. So aside from the Niche Stakeholder Working Group, we have 8 other priority projects. These special projects or priority projects are the top projects chosen by the SPURS leadership team back in 2017. You'll see here a list of the 9 priority projects, and we're just going to talk about the one here in a few slides, but we'll discuss a little bit of an introduction a little bit further into the special projects as a whole. So who makes up a special project team? And this goes for all 9 special projects. Each team is made up of a SPURS leadership team member and SPURS volunteer employees. Now, the great thing about these teams is that volunteers come from all districts and all levels. So on our team today, speaking, Dr. Sierra Burrell and myself, we're both from different districts. We both happen to be VMOs, but we have AHTs in our team, and we have administrative people as well. So anyone and everyone is welcome to apply to their project of interest. The goal of each SPURS project, special project, is basically it was to achieve measurable progress by December of 2017. Each team had established its own goals based on the title and the objectives of that project, and you'll see ours here shortly. But the overall goal is to achieve measurable goals by the end of December 2017. So now let's delve a little bit deeper. You'll see, again, these are the 9 special projects, and we're going to talk specifically about the Niche Stakeholder Working Group. Now, you'll notice that the N, I keep saying niche, but it's written as non-traditional. I wanted to bring that up because on the website, if you look on the SharePoint, you'll see non-traditional. We and our team discussed the target audience that we were trying to reach out to, and we realized after speaking with stakeholders and our team members, we decided to change the N from non-traditional to niche, as we realized that non-traditional actually did not capture our goals, and niche was more inclusive. The reason for that is that non-traditional sounds like it is out of the norm, and it is something that is uncommon, whereas if you think about it, the majority of producers out there are these small, unique, specialized producers. So that is why we will say niche, even though it's written as non-traditional still online. So who is classified as a niche stakeholder? And you'll see NS to represent niche stakeholder moving forward. So these stakeholders involve smaller and more specialized production systems. This list is very much so just a group of examples and very much so not exclusive. So these examples are pastured poultry, pastured pork, alternative fiber-producing species, heritage livestock breeders, bush track racing owners and trainers, small cow-calf production systems, et cetera. So why is the Niche Stakeholder Working Group a special project? Our team came up with a problem statement, and you'll see that here on the next slide. But basically, to answer this question, we realized that animal production systems are evolving to include increasing numbers of small and specialized producers. Veterinary Services disease eradication programs, from on-farm surveillance to major packer slaughter surveillance, further are disconnected. They have disconnected the agency from specialized producers. Many in the growing sector of niche producers have little to no experience with regulatory veterinary medicine, and nationally, Vet Services has little experience with them. Communication between niche stakeholders and Vet Services is complex due to the fragmentation of the industries, the public's and the niche stakeholders' lack of knowledge regarding largely eradicated livestock diseases, decreasing availability and funding for university-based agricultural extension, and the lack of livestock veterinarians in many areas of the United States. These factors have contributed to recent occurrences of zoonotic disease spillover to humans, in some cases with a person serving as the sentinel for disease in livestock. Here's the problem statement that you will see. I will let that up for a second, but the summary covered it all. I will go over and hand over to Dr. Burrell to give the first example of why the Niche Stakeholder Working Group is actually very significant, and these are going to be two examples in action of why there's a need for this group.
Thank you. So our first example is the Northeast swine brucellosis outbreak. Many of you may be familiar with this, and the interesting part about it was the first case that we identified was actually from a human. That's how we learned about this outbreak. So more information about that. They had pasture-raised swine. It was a family operation, and a lot of these swine tested positive for brucellosis. From there was a trace-out investigation, and there were 13 states involved and several infected herds. They never actually found the cause of the infection, but feral swine exposure is what we're believing led to this outbreak and this infection. And the interesting part about that is most of these states do not recognize a feral population unless there's an established breeding population. So that muddies the waters a little bit. And when it comes to backyard producers, there's a general lack of surveillance and outreach and education, because this is a group that traditionally has done things on their own and or would like to continue to do things on their own. So this outbreak involving a human, involving several herds, several states, is just one example of why this working group is so significant. And I will turn it back over to Dr. Rozensher.
Thank you. So our second example is a case of equine piroplasmosis that was found here in the country. Basically, the way this was identified was that certain states require testing for racehorse movement, and oftentimes this disease, even though it stems from a tick vector, oftentimes this disease in the bush track racing arena spreads via fomites. So bush track racers, racing owners and trainers, a lot of times lack knowledge of the disease potential. They're unfamiliar with program reportable or foreign animal diseases. They're unfamiliar with regulatory points of contact to report these to, even if they did know the clinical signs to look for. So what was done in this case was outreach was performed to try to bridge that gap of lack of knowledge and awareness, and to go and show face to these stakeholders, these niche stakeholders. With outreach, we were able to establish trust. The outreach was well received once they understood what in the world was going on and the reason we were asking so many questions. And then stakeholder compliance has actually been extremely high in this case. So clearly, with bridging the gap and being able to address their concerns, we were able to avoid any sort of lack of trust and lack of stakeholder compliance. Samples were collected just fine once everything was understood, and quarantines were issued. And quarantine being issued on racehorses that are set to race the next day, you can imagine there could be a lack of stakeholder compliance. But because of the trust that was established and the information shared, there was compliance, and that was key. So again, to answer the question, why is the Niche Stakeholder Working Group a special project? It allows animal disease communication gaps to be addressed and resolved. So another statement that we had put together as a team, not just a problem statement, but the mission statement, was our team's way of, it was our team's solution, my apologies, to resolving this communication gap. And again, the full mission statement will be on the next slide, but just to summarize, Vet Services, education, and outreach is imperative to achieve APHIS's mission of protecting and improving the health, productivity, and quality of life for animals and people, and maintaining and promoting the safety and availability of our nation's animals and animal products. So our goal here is that in veterinary services, we can assist niche stakeholders with barriers to successful production, increase knowledge on topics such as livestock diseases, zoonotic diseases, biosecurity, interstate movement, and other animal husbandry and animal health issues. Ultimately, this will allow veterinary services to more completely fulfill its mission to prevent, detect, and control damaging livestock diseases. This is the full official mission statement that we put together, and I will let y'all read that another time. And here's Dr. Sierra Burrell.
Thank you. Here's a list of our founding members of this working group, and as Dr. Rozensher previously mentioned, we have people from different districts and different levels, and I really think that we had a great team for this working group. So now I'm going to talk a little bit about our 2017 accomplishments. You already heard about our mission statement and problem statement, and that was very important to us because we wanted to ensure that we were able to set goals and also achieve those goals. So that was, definitely one of our first accomplishments. Then we wanted to make a plan about how to learn about these niche industries and how to best communicate with these stakeholders. So in order to do that, we performed in-depth research to gather data on how to understand them and what the veterinary services concerns were, what the stakeholders' concerns were, and how we can really merge that together. That information was used to develop a draft stakeholder survey, which you'll hear more about in a little bit. We also had an unofficial implementation of a draft of our survey, and we obtained some really interesting results from that, and that helped us to continue to develop the survey that we will use finally once we get OMB approval. And I really think that's our biggest accomplishment. A lot of work went into creating that survey. A lot of drafts also happened for that survey. We also followed guidelines for performing a public education campaign. So that set of guidelines is something that we're going to use when we move forward in our efforts. So I'm going to go through the steps of what we really did as a working group so far. So step number one was the development of this niche stakeholder survey. So our team brainstormed ideas and thoughts about survey content. We really wanted to make sure that our questions were giving us the information that we needed. Then we had the team members assigned to different commodity groups, and each group of people, they came together and they researched the available resources that they had to the public. So that could be everything from internet search to access to extension agents or subject matter experts. And then we wanted to compile all that information for each of the commodity groups. It was also really important for us to include niche stakeholders across the country. Again, we have different people in this group from different districts, and each of us had a different perspective on a particular group just because of where we were geographically. We also wanted to consider communication barriers when we made this survey. We didn't want to use a lot of scientific terminology, and we wanted to think about how we could disseminate the survey. If this was going to be something that had to be passed along by word of mouth, or if it would be on paper or online. So we tried to consider all of that as we developed this survey. For step number two, we did a pretest of the survey. So each of the team members went out and interviewed a local producer or local level stakeholder. We took those results, and then we came back and we interpreted those results. We talked to the different team members, and we wanted to make sure we compiled that information to create a better survey. So the feedback that we got, it really showed us what we didn't know. We might have not included a certain group or a certain purpose that or reason why they had these animals. And so it was really important that we took that information from some of our local producers and that we used that moving forward to develop our final survey. For number 3, we started to put together a final draft. So we took those results that we got from the pre-testing of the survey and we interpreted them. It was really important that we could figure out which questions to use and then which answer options. We didn't want to overwhelm them with answer choices, but it also was important that there were enough options that they could really find something that worked for them. So we really wanted to examine the choices that we had for answers, and we also had a couple places where they could write in something, and that was also very important. We also discussed the method of delivery for the survey, and I'll give you a couple of examples of questions that we had from the survey. So one of them was, where do you get information about animal diseases and keeping your animals healthy? And this is one of those where they would check all that apply. We have a lot listed on this question for answer options. This includes your veterinarian, your extension agent, a local organization, a livestock or poultry magazine, etc. Another example of a question that we had was, what are the biggest animal health issues affecting your operation? Please rank the top 3. So we really wanted to make sure that we had enough answer choices that everybody was able to find something that they could actually answer. We didn't want everything to be other. So we really tried to make sure that we took those results from the pre-test survey and made sure that we had enough options for all of our producers. So step number 4, this is where we had our bigger trial run. So we tested this survey with members of the Livestock Conservancy at the Heritage Livestock Conference in Williamsburg. We had 21 people that agreed to fill out the survey. Most of the respondents stated that they rely on their veterinarians for animal health information. Some other common sources included extension agents, magazines, and other producers. There was a hot topic for this group, or maybe one family or respondent, and they talked about ovine progressive pneumonia, and that was the only disease that was specifically named multiple times. So that was an interesting thing as well. Also, we found that the most important animal health issue that they were facing was parasitic disease, and 1/3 of the group is finding it difficult to locate a veterinarian in the area that treats the type of livestock that they keep. Another interesting thing was that nearly half of the respondents consider themselves knowledgeable about zoonotic disease, and the rest think that they know the basics. When it came to preferences for ways to receive animal health information, that varied widely, which you can imagine. Everybody has their own preference for how they'd like to receive information. So that's something that we expected. The thing that I thought was very interesting is most of them preferred the formation of a working group of producers from various groups that could provide veterinary services with guidance on issues to address in their community, as well as the best methods for outreach. There was more than half of these respondents that said they would participate in such a group if it was convenient for them to do so. I think that is a really, really great finding, and I know it's a small sample size, but I think that is a really positive thing that we can take and run with in the future. So step number 5 is submitting for OMB, Office of Management and Budget, for final approval. And that's definitely something that takes a while, but that is a step all in itself. So some of the challenges that we had along the way, for the members of our working group, there were definitely several natural disasters, and when that occurs, rightfully so, this is not the #1 priority. So that definitely affected our group as a whole, as well as just scheduling. We're all definitely busy people, and our schedules can vary, and we're also in different time zones. So that definitely could affect it, as well as holidays. When it came to the stakeholders, there can be a huge challenge when it comes to general mistrust of government involvement, and that's something that we will continue to have to overcome no matter what we do with this group. And when it comes to people who consider themselves hobby producers, they might feel that outreach is unnecessary. They think of their production system as a hobby and not as something that they really want a lot of involvement with outside people, much less the government. So that's definitely another challenge that we face and will probably continue to face. Our 2018 goals. We would like to use this OMB-approved survey to conduct research on a greater sample size across the country to better understand and address the needs and concerns of the niche stakeholders. We also really would like to develop a library of outreach material for a public education campaign. This could include standardized fact sheets or PowerPoints across various topics, and that's something that could be really, really helpful when we try to go out and talk to these people and understand what they need from us and what they want from us. We also want to educate all of Veterinary Services about the availability of this outreach material, and we really want to promote a standardized message across the country. I think it's very important. We're going into these communities that might be tight-knit communities, or at least within their commodity groups that's pretty tight-knit, and I think it's important that when we go out, we all have a standardized message because they're going to talk to each other anyway, and I think it's important that we present a standardized message. We also want to use FADI as a forum to spread the word and increase awareness about these upcoming messages and to promote these messages. We were thinking about also doing some introductory webinars in each district to introduce the subject. So now that you've been introduced to our working group and what we've been doing, we really would love if you could spread the word. It'll definitely take time to create and improve official outreach materials, but we still want you to keep an eye out for it. And we would love if you could support your local team members. That's a huge thing that you can do. And if you have any suggestions or recommendations, do not hesitate to contact the team members in your area, or any of the team members, really. Here's a list again of our founding members of this working group for your reference. And this is also very exciting, a call for new members. They've extended our special project into fiscal year 18, and new members are encouraged to bring forward new ideas and continue to work with the team. And if you're interested in becoming a member, you can contact Dr. McKenna, and his email address is listed below. And I believe that we're going to take questions at this point.
Ladies and gentlemen, as we move to Q&A, please feel free to place yourself into the question queue by pressing #2 on your telephone keypad. You will hear a notification when your line is unmuted. At that time, please instate your name and question. To submit a written question, use the chat panel on the right-hand side of your screen. Choose All Panelists from the Send To drop-down menu.
At this time, we don't have any written questions in the queue. Does anybody have a verbal question?
Not at this time.
Okay, so we do have one come in. So can you go back to the mission statement slide, please? To see if there's a question about the mission statement. But as of right now, I don't have any other written questions. Okay, so the comment came back, thanks, great work and great job. Give everybody a couple more minutes. Oh, here's another one. How do you intend to communicate with the niche producers who are not Livestock Conservancy members? for either Karen or Sierra.
Yeah, so sorry, Sierra, would you like to?
No, you can go ahead, sorry.
So the Livestock Conservancy, that was basically the big trial run. So the official survey isn't approved yet, but as Sierra had mentioned, we are working on creating all sorts of different methods of putting out the survey, whether it's paper, online, word of mouth, through the vet services team members. So that was just an example to try to get a larger audience and try to get as much feedback before finalizing the survey. So we intend to put it out there, paper version, online, et cetera, and that was just our trial run.
Okay, another question is, and this may have already been answered, when will the survey be given to a larger group?
Yes, so that will happen once we receive OMB approval. So we have to wait for that before we can do any sort of large-scale survey for the public. So we don't have a time for that, but, as soon as it gets approved, we will move forward with that.
The next question is, will a repository of outreach materials in PDF printable format be made available to all district offices for use?
We're hoping to be able to do that. It's all going to depend, timing-wise on how long it takes for us to put those outreach materials together and get them approved by LPA. Once they're approved by LPA, then they'll be official and we'll be able to disseminate them and have them in what we call a library. So we're hoping to have all of that as PDF printable material. We're also hoping to have presentations that will be official, that will be able to set a standard across the country so we're all presenting the same way on the same information. In the meantime, there was discussion about having sort of unofficial presentations, not necessarily to be disseminated or to be put in a library, but just something to start performing outreach in an unofficial sort of way.
Okay, so I have a couple more. The next question and comment says, great project on so many levels. One question is how, if this project may feed into EPI work going forward. There is concern that smaller producers represent greater disease risk. Any way that your efforts can be shown to impact that relationship based on improved communication?
So that's a great question, and I think that right now we don't have a way of being able to show an impact based on improved communication, but that's definitely something that I think we're moving towards. That might be another group that actually delves into that, but one of the reasons that our working group exists is because of the possible greater disease risk. So I think that all may tie in together. I just don't think that right now we have a way of demonstrating that.
At this time, we have too small of a sample size to be able to say anything. Again, the samples that, well, quote-unquote samples that we were using, for our initial trials and then the big trial were just to be able to direct us in the right way to bridge that communication gap between stakeholders and vet services. And so moving forward, like Dr. Burrell had said, we're hoping to be able to close that gap. And if you think about it, the greater disease risk is because of lack of communication, lack of outreach, lack of knowledge. And so these steps hopefully will be able to lessen that disease risk.
Okay, there's another question that's asking about the goals for 2018.
We can put that slide back up.
Okay, I can do that.
So the goals for 2017 were to get this up and running, find out the right direction. You know, we had that slide up there, and there were several smaller goals, and the biggest goal, as Dr. Burrell had mentioned, was to create a survey so that we can go out and start getting feedback and move forward with the project. 2018 is more so putting that into action, not only on their survey level, but as outreach as well to start bridging that gap. So that's the majority of the 2018 goals at this time. Moving forward, if there are new members that come in with fresh ideas, if the team moves forward as is, you know, there's a lot of factors that can change the goals of 2018 moving forward, as it is sort of a dynamic process as the project continues on.
I have another participant asking to see the slide with the working group members. Okay, and they said thanks for that. We did have another comment about what great work this is. There was one other question that came in. It was talking about any way that your efforts can be shown to impact the relationship based on improved communication. And there was another part of that that I didn't see. It just says establishing a baseline wasn't read. So as she said, she agreed, it's hard to show any impact yet. So another question is, what is the time commitment for the working group?
Great question. It's actually not very time-consuming, relatively speaking. We have a conference call, and again, this may change moving forward, but on average, we have a conference call every 2 weeks for an hour, and it's set, you know, on a on a repetitive schedule, so every 2 weeks at the same time for 1 hour. Give or take, you know, if the topic that day is just we have to continue working, then it might be shorter and it might not last the whole hour, but we always stick to the 1 hour cap. And we do have work on the side, outside work, obviously, for us to put into action the initial trials and then the big trial. You know, each team member will hold their own weight, and so sometimes one team member might have a little bit more work than the other, but we try to definitely work as a team. And we have access to email, obviously. Whenever we need to reach out to one another, we have our SharePoint. So there is definitely some outside work, but it's not very time-consuming, and it's actually sometimes very exciting work for me to take a break from my normal everyday work and, you know, stay focused on the Niche Stakeholder Working Group and see the impact that we can do on that level. So not very time-consuming, but it does take a little bit of dedication for sure.
We have another comment. Thanks for the outstanding presentation. What ideas do you have to overcome government mistrust when administering the survey to the larger group of producers, in parentheses, in the next phase?
Sorry, you can go ahead.
No, go for it.
I guess in my mind, overcoming mistrust means establishing a relationship. And so I think it's important for members of VS to be able to establish these relationships with people who are in these communities. And, you know, once you establish a relationship with one or two producers, then I think that the rest of the group kind of sees, oh, well, maybe these people are actually here to help. So I guess in my mind, it's about establishing a relationship and not just leading with, we want to know all this information. Like maybe try to relate to them on some other level before moving forward with the survey. That's just my personal opinion.
Yeah, and to add to that, I definitely agree with that. And to add to that, going out in good times is also very important and not just bad times. You know, in SPURS, surveillance, preparedness, response, that is what we do day in and day out. That's how I explain what we do to people. And in the off times that we're not responding, which hopefully is more so than not, right, that we're not responding to disease outbreak, we should be going out there and introducing ourselves and showing people that we, quote unquote, come in peace, and, you know, giving these presentations and outreach and building that trust and establishing those relationships in the good times. And then another side note to all of this is, even if you don't join one of these projects, you'll notice that there's only a handful or a couple handfuls of names in the project, in the team. But hopefully this project can motivate y'all to go out and start building these bridges and identifying these gaps. And if you don't want to have that time commitment or be a part of the team, feel free to contact any team member. Email Dr. McKenna. Let us know any ideas, and we'll definitely put that into action as well and include it moving forward. But this should just be a motivation to start identifying who isn't actually contacted, what information is missing, and how can we make it better.
Next question is, are there parallel efforts going on in PPQ or BRS? Seems like it would be good to join forces since some producers raise food/feed as well as animals.
I honestly do not know if there are any parallel efforts going on, but I think that's an excellent question and idea, and we definitely can look into that and find that out.
And if there aren't any efforts, because I'm not sure either, if there aren't any at this time, maybe another sort of goal that is set, with the group moving forward is to reach out to those sections and try to build those bridges as well and try to put One Health into action. So that's a great suggestion.
Okay, at this time we don't have any more written questions. Are there any verbal questions in the queue?
There are no verbal questions at this time.
Okay, well, if there's no more questions, we'll go ahead and conclude this. It was a great webinar, so thank you both for doing that. And I just wanted to let everyone know we have another webinar coming up on disposal, which will be on March 13th, and the speaker will be Lori Miller. And just watch your email because there's a whole bunch of them that are going to come up before the beginning of May. So thanks, everyone. Have a great afternoon.
Thank you so much.
Thanks for joining the conference. The call has now concluded, and you may disconnect.